If you have a copy of God's Word, I hope that you do. Open to Matthew 25 with me. Matthew 25. We're going to begin in verse 1, and hopefully we're going to look at the first 30 verses together, assuming things go the way I anticipate they will. We'll look at those together. But before I do, today's a good day. Y'all having a good day? Yeah, today's kind of a special day for me. I'm going to get in trouble for it too. Today marks 14 years that my wife has been married to me. She is a lucky, lucky woman. Maybe that cuts the other way. I'm sorry, I heard something. Or a saint. Makes her a saint? No kidding. Yeah. Insane? Did you say insane? A saint. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Maybe an insane saint. I don't know. So 14 years she has tolerated me. So today's a good day. It's been a good 14 years. But that's not what we're here for. But I did have to say that. I threatened to sing to her. And she said, if you do, I will walk out. So I'm not going to do that. Anyway, so if you have a Bible open, Matthew 25, that's going to be where we're at today. And we're going to kind of talk about what we really started talking about last week, 2 weeks ago. We started talking about this thing called eschatology, okay? And we used that fun word, and I asked y'all if you knew what it meant. Some of you are like, yeah. Some of you are like, I have no idea. And what? But eschatology, and a simple definition of eschatology is the study of the last things. Okay, so that's simple definition, study of the last things. And that's what we started looking at in Matthew 24, and then how that ties into Matthew 25 is what we're going to get into today. And I warned y'all, we're going to have different opinions, but there are certain things that I think we need to agree on. But last week, one of those things that we needed to agree on, we saw was that we needed to be watchful. We needed to be watchful because Scripture is clear. The return of Jesus, it's going to come unexpectedly. If you remember this, the return of Jesus was one of those foundational things. And if you start reading the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, one conclusion that I promise you will come away with, if you're reading it honestly with an open mind and trying to understand what it says, you will come away with the conclusion that Jesus is coming back. He clearly teaches he's coming back. So I think we need to agree on that, okay? And because he's coming back, we need to be watchful. We need to be watching for that return. Today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this eschatology. We're going to dig a little bit deeper, and we're going to look at two more parables that show us some more instruction for how we live between Jesus' first coming and his second coming. Okay, so it teaches us something about how we live now. Okay? Y'all tracking with that? Cool. Well, all of these parables that Jesus teaches in Matthew 24 and 25, they have some overlap. They all have a similar perspective, right? So Jesus is coming unexpectedly, and that flows through all of these parables. But each one of them has a slightly different flavor, right? Just a slightly different twist that shows us a different aspect of how we live. And some of these that we're going to look at today, actually I think both of these that we're going to look at today, if you grew up in the church, these are probably going to sound familiar to most of you probably. And next week, we're going to look at the final one, kind of the grand finale of the chapter as Jesus finishes this teaching block, and then we get to roll into the betrayal, crucifixion, and resurrection. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at these two parables at the beginning of Matthew 25 and see the particular flavor that they have and the instruction that they have. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to walk through the text again today. I think it'll be helpful for me. I know it certainly is as I'm studying it and trying to get some clarity in my own mind to walk through and mark it up. So I thought maybe we could do that as a congregation again. So Matthew 25, here it is. We're going to walk through. And oh boy, look at that. Do I need to? Hey, everybody just tilt your head sideways like this for me, would you? Hey, looky there. I'm drawing lines on it, but we got it. Now there we go. Okay. Hey, and y'all are vertical again. Cool. All right. So we're going to walk through this. In basic setup for this, right, we got two parables that we're going to look at today. First, we're going to look at this parable of the 10 virgins, and then we're going to look at the parable of the talents, and we're going to see how each one of them applies to our lives today. So let's do this. Starts out, very beginning, at that time. Okay? At that time. What time are we talking about? Well, again, this ties to last week. And we talk about this return of Jesus and what it's going to be like. So Jesus here is describing the kingdom when he comes. And just as a side note, this is part of the reason I think that Jesus in 24 is talking about the last things, like the end time. Because if you read these two parables, they clearly apply to Jesus' second coming. Very clearly apply to Jesus' second coming. Matthew 25 doesn't make a lot of sense unless you recognize that it's answering two questions, right? When will the temple be destroyed? And what is the sign of the end of the age and the coming of the Son of Man? So when is this going to happen? What is the sign? So he's answering these questions. So Jesus says, at that time, when he comes again, the kingdom of heaven will be like. And there's this fun word right here that shows us that Jesus is setting up an analogy. Okay? This doesn't tell us everything we need to know about the consummated kingdom, but it tells us something. It tells us something that we need to know. Okay? So when Jesus returns, what's it going to be like? What is the coming of the kingdom really going to be like? Well, he goes on. At that time, when he returns, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the groom. Okay. What we need to understand is that Jesus and Matthew, they have a purpose for saying what they're saying. They're trying to communicate something, right? Can we agree on that? They're communicating something. And to understand what they're trying to communicate, we need to put ourselves in a particular mindset, and we need to think like what? A first century Jewish audience. And if we think like them, it'll help us to understand what Jesus is teaching. And this was a common picture, this going out to meet the groom. This is the way things would go. See, whenever there was a wedding ceremony, it would kind of go like this. There would be the betrothal stage where the two were legally, they're essentially married, right? They are betrothed to one another. They're more or less married, but they haven't consummated that marriage yet. So whenever it was time for the actual wedding ceremony, the groom would go to the bride's house and get his bride. Okay, this wasn't like you all show up at the church building and everybody comes to the same meeting spot and they come separately. That's not how it worked. The groom would go get his bride from her home. Okay? And if you want to have a picture, like that's where the father gives away his daughter, right there at his own home. He says, now I'm transferring authority, transferring responsibility to her husband. Okay? So the groom would go get his bride, and then they would parade back through the town, back to the groom's home where they would have the wedding feast. They would have this sort of party to celebrate, right? Okay, and it's on the way back to the groom's home that other guests would join in the procession, including what here are called these 10 virgins. They were sort of like bridesmaids. We can kind of think of them like bridesmaids, okay? So they're joining in this procession as the groom is on his way back to his home where the wedding feast would be held. Y'all tracking with us, right? Okay, cool. So all of them we find, every one of them took their lamps. All of them had their lamps with them. They're ready to go. And you need your lamp, right? Because by this time it's probably dark as this procession goes back to the groom's home, so you're going to want to be able to see. All have their lamps. Every one of them has their lamps. So the question isn't about lamps. We're going to get to the question here in just a moment, though. Okay? So let's keep going. Verse 2. Five of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. All right. This is pretty simple, right? The distinguishing mark is not the lamps because all of them have their lamps. But we know that 5 are foolish and 5 are wise. Okay, one of my favorite words is juxtapose, right? What Jesus is doing here, what he's doing here is he's juxtaposing, he's setting aside these 5 wise virgins and these 5 foolish virgins, setting them side by side so that we can see a contrast between them, right? So he does that. There has to be a defining mark, though, because why were they wise? Why were they foolish? What was the characteristic that made them what they were? Well, it says when the foolish, notice this is the foolish, when they took their lamps, they didn't take oil with them. But, and here's this word, right? Okay, so here's where it's setting them side by side. The foolish ones did not take oil, but the wise ones took oil in their flasks with their lamp. Okay? The defining characteristic is not the lamp, it is the oil, right? Y'all see that. That's what the difference is. So, why is that such a big deal? Well, when the groom was delayed, they every one of them became drowsy and fell asleep. They all became drowsy and fell asleep. Okay. Now, last week, we touched on 2 analogies that Jesus used to point to the suddenness of Jesus' return, right? First, it was the homeowner and the thief, and it showed us that we need to be watchful, waiting for Jesus to return. Second was the wise and the wicked servant. So in other words, don't give in to poor behavior if the master should be delayed. Don't give in to poor behavior. But here, we get a different picture. Today, what this urges us to is to be prepared for the master if he's delayed. Because notice again, the groom was delayed. Again, maybe a possible hint at Jesus' delayed return. But here we see the groom was delayed, and they all became drowsy. Nothing is said in this parable about the virgins falling asleep, neither positive nor negative. They're not chastised for falling asleep. They all do that, right? That's not the point. Instead, the point is that the master could at some time arrive, and they don't know when. So they must ensure that they have what's necessary when he arrives. Y'all see that, right? They need to make sure that they're prepared when the groom arrives. Let's keep going. Verse 6. Verse 6. In the middle of the night, and that's going to be important, in the middle of the night, okay, there was a shout. Here's the groom. Come out and meet him. All right. Fun note here, because this in the middle of the night, if you read virtually any other translation, it says at midnight, right? NIV says that, New American Standard says that, King James says midnight. Like all the other major translations, I don't know why CSB decides to say middle of the night. It's the same thing. Y'all get the idea. But it's midnight. And midnight is important because whenever we start talking about eschatology, midnight is a picture. It's a biblical symbol for eschatological climax. Like this is a big deal. Like, in other words, this is Jesus' way of saying, at the culmination of everything. Like at the culmination, like at the grand finale, at the biggest moment, whenever everything in history comes together, the groom returns. Here comes the groom. Now, I hope that sparks something in your mind about a groom coming for his bride. Does that sound anything like Jesus coming for his church? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here, because, boy, that sure sparks it in my mind. So, the groom is coming. So what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to come out and meet him. All right. Well, that all sounds well and good, right? Well, then all the virgins got up, trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise ones, "Give us some of your oil, because our lamps are going out." Give us some of your oil, because our lamps are going out. Now, all of them had fallen asleep. All of them are roused. All of them are ready to go, except the foolish ones, they're out of oil. Their lamps aren't staying lit. And they're now realizing that they are unprepared for the groom. They're not ready for this procession. So what happens? They ask for oil. Well, the wise ones, notice again, here's the wise ones, they answered, "No, there won't be enough for us and for you. Go instead to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." In other words, what we find is that the oil is not transferable. And even if it is transferable, and you try to attempt a transfer here, the oil leaves both parties lacking. It's not enough for both. They need their own oil to keep their lamp lit. So, can't transfer it. Well, we assume then that the foolish virgins, right? They go to buy some, right? It says that when they had gone to buy some, what happened? What happened? The groom arrived, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet. And, I got to scroll down because you got to see this last part. And what happened? When they go into the banquet, the door was shut. They go in the banquet, the door was shut. And this is strong language. It's sealed. It is shut. There's no more entrance. And I think that this strong language would remind Jesus' hearers of another time a door was shut. And again, if you're anything like me, you think of a very particular time where God shut a door. Y'all familiar with the story of Noah? Y'all remember that? Noah built this ark because God said that he was going to send a flood to destroy the earth. There was going to be judgment on the earth. But this ark was going to be his way out. It was going to be his provision, his safety. It was going to be the way he survived this judgment. So, whenever the time for the flood came, Noah and all the animals and those in Noah's family, they boarded the ark, and who shut the door? God shut the door. It was sealed. There was no more entrance into that ark. It was done. Anyone on the outside, what happened to them? Well, they were swept away in the floods. Okay. Time was up. No one else entered. And we get that same picture here. They come to the banquet. The virgins who were prepared entered with the groom. Those who were unprepared came afterwards and found the door shut. Well, later, the rest of these virgins, they showed up and they said, Master, Master, open up for us. And this is emphatic. We see this repetition of master, and it indicates intensity. Like the reason they're saying, Master, Master, you can almost hear the panic in these virgins' voice as they're realizing that they were unprepared and now they're late. So what does the master say to them as they come and they start beating on this shut door? He replied, Truly I tell you. Anytime you see that, just understand Jesus is about to drop some knowledge, like he's about to do something awesome. He says, Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Because they failed in being prepared for the groom, these foolish virgins, they are left out of the wedding banquet. There's no more admittance. They are out. Door is sealed. They cannot come in. They are unknown by the master. Jesus gets to the point here in verse 13, kind of summarizes this parable. He says, therefore, right? Box that thing in because that's important. Therefore, what are you commanded to do? Be alert. Be alert because you don't know either the day or the hour. This term, be alert, this is important. It's actually often used of the night watch, right? And you guys get the picture of a night watch. They're sitting here. They're trying to make sure everything is as it's supposed to be. They're on guard in a way. And it indicates a sort of responsible watchfulness, right? You don't want somebody who's irresponsible on the night watch, do you? That's going to create problems. You want somebody responsible on this night watch, watching and ready. And essentially, here's the Jared summary of this. Be ready for the arrival of the groom since you don't know when he's coming. Be ready. You don't know when he's coming. We need to be prepared. We need to be watchful and waiting and ready with everything we need. See, the truth is, Jesus is coming back, and you don't know when. So the question that this parable throws in your face is, are you ready for the coming of the groom? Are you prepared? Or are you like the foolish virgins who are going to be left outside, standing at the door saying, Master, Master, please let us in? Are you prepared? Are you prepared? Can you imagine the disappointment that these foolish virgins felt when they hear, I don't know you? The rejection they felt, not being able to go into this banquet, left outside. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, Jared, we're talking about the end, right? Like eschatology, like the end of all things. Yeah, that's true. But as we talk about eschatology, we're talking about the end of things, right? The end of all things. That would include the end of your life. So my question, I'm just going to twist this just a little bit and just go an extra step. Like not only the end of all history, but the end of your life. Are you prepared? I remember in high school, I was a part of several different ministries, and I remember we would go to certain events, and I always thought they were like big-time scare tactics. Y'all ever been to those? I remember we would go, and it would be like, and sorry if this offends any of you, but the goal was to scare the hell out of kids. Like literally, like scare you away from hell. Like that was the goal. That was the aim. And I'm not saying that that's entirely wrong because hell is a reality, and we should be terrified of that reality. But you see Jesus here, he's saying, look, there's a time coming when that door is shut. You are out of opportunities. You should have been prepared before. And when that door's shut, there's no reopening it. Just to be clear, that's what happens at death. That door is shut. Opportunities are over. Are you prepared for that time? So whether Jesus returns today or tomorrow or in your lifetime or 5,000 years from now, or you face the reality that we all have to face at some point, that death is there. Like, are you ready? That's the question that this parable begs of us. Like, answer that question. Are you ready for the groom? So there's the first parable. Parable of the 10 virgins. Let's go on to the second, and we'll tie this all together here at the end, hopefully. So let's keep going. Okay, we get to the second parable, this parable of the talents. And Jesus, again, he says, for it is just like, again, he's using this analogy, for it is just like a man about to go on a journey. He called his own servants, and he entrusted his possessions to them. Okay, so you get this picture. It's simple enough, right? This guy's going on a trip. It's apparently going to be a pretty lengthy trip because he takes all of his possessions, he gives to his servants, and he says, here, manage what I've got while I'm gone. This is your responsibility. Take care of this. So he distributes those possessions, okay? Verse 15, we go on. This is interesting to me. All right? To one, he gave 5 talents. To another, 2 talents. And to another, 1 talent. And this may be one of the most important parts of this entire parable. And if you miss this part, you're not going to get the rest of it. So he gave 5 talents to one, to another 2 talents, to another 1 talent, depending on each one's ability. Depending on each one's ability. Okay. So the man leaves. He gives these talents to his servants at varying levels, 5, 2, and 1. And as we read this, it could have just as easily been 10, 8, and 4. It doesn't really, the numbers don't matter. You see that they're varying levels. That's the point. Okay? 5, 2, and 1. All right, now let's stop and let's say, what in the world is a talent? Y'all have talents, but that's not the kind of talent we're talking about here, is it? Talents here are money. Like it's a sum of money. And as I was reading about this, a talent was this measure of currency that seems to be a little unclear according to historians. If you read the NIV, there's probably a footnote that says that it was more than $1,000. That is a very, very light estimate. Because most estimates that I read put it somewhere from $20,000 to $30,000 today. The biggest I read was 20 years' wages for a common laborer. A talent was not some small amount of money. That's the point I want you to see. Okay? It was not something small. It was something sizable. This was a lot of money. Now, although Jesus is clearly talking about money whenever he's talking about these talents, we got to remember, it's like this. He's using a parable to teach us something. So what are the talents that he's given us? Well, let's just take talent and say talent, okay? And y'all see what I did there, right? You've been given certain gifts. You've been given certain abilities. You've been given certain talents. And how you manage those is going to be important. And that's what we're going to see as we keep going here. So within the context of this parable, the master is clearly leaving them in charge of something of significant value. Now, here's the part that sometimes we fail to grasp. The master knew the ability of his servants before he left, right? Like you see that. It's not like he's leaving them 5, 2, and 1 to see what their talent level is, to see what their ability level is. He knows it already. They're his servants. He already knows what they're capable of. That's assumed here in this parable. This is not some test that he's leaving them. It says very clearly, he knows each one's ability. So he leaves them these talents depending on their ability. And since he knows them, he expects them to use their abilities as good servants to multiply his possessions, right? That's what he expects of his servants. And I think sometimes we fail to see that. God knows your ability. He knows your ability. He's not giving you more than you can manage. He wouldn't. He knows what you're capable of. He knows what he's put in you. Manage what he's given you well. All right? Let's keep going. Verse 16. The master goes on his journey, and immediately, the man who had received, 5 talents, went and put them to work. Notice, he put them to work. And he earned 5 more. Now, you guys get this, right? He had 5. He made 5 more. That's a pretty good return on his investment, right? He did a good job with what he had. All right? You can see that. That's pretty simple. Verse 17 keeps going. I think I went too far, but you guys will get the point here. In the same way, the man with 2 earned 2 more. And again, doubled it, right? I'm not good at math, but I know that's a 100% increase. All right? You all good at math like that? 100%? That's double? Okay, cool. All right. 100% increase for both of them. The one with 2 earned 2 more. The one with 5 earned 5 more. So they doubled their master's possession. We see this increase. But here's the problem. The problem comes whenever you see this simple 3-letter word right here, but. Uh-oh. Something's different here, right? You see the one with 5 increased, the one with 2 increased, but the one who had received 1 talent, he went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Okay. The first two were faithful, and they saw it increase. The third, well, he hid the money. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? That seems foolish, doesn't it? Why in the world, if he's supposed to be managing the master's money, why did he do it like this? Well, let's keep going because we find out he explains. Again, after a long time, just a hint that this may take a while. After a long time, the master of those servants came and he settled accounts with them. All right, now that makes sense, right? If I leave you with something of mine and I come back and I'm like, hey, you were supposed to manage this, I'm going to come back and say, hey, what did you do with what you were supposed to be managing? Okay, that's pretty simple. Y'all got it. After a long time, he comes back, settles accounts. The master of those servants came, settled accounts with him. The man who had received 5 talents approached, presented 5 more talents. And again, 5 and 5. Jesus is clearly making a point here. And he said, Master, you gave me how many? 5. And see, I've earned 5 more talents. All right, here's what you left me with. Pretty simple. Verse 21. His master said to him, and I love this, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. And let me just stop for a minute and say, if you don't long to hear those words, I don't know if you understand the Christian faith. Like, well done, good and faithful servant should be the words that we just long to hear from our master. We just long to hear that. Well done, good and faithful servant. He goes on and says, you are faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. And I love this. Share your master's joy. Share your master's joy. All right. Pretty much the same thing happens in verse 22 and 23 here with the man with 2 talents. The man with 2 talents, he approached, right? 2 talents, he approached. He said, Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I've earned 2 more talents. Tells him what happened with his money. His master said to him pretty much the exact same thing. Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share in your master's joy. Same thing. Why? Because they took what God had given them and they put it to work and they saw it multiply. So what's the point here? Well, because the servants were faithful with the talents their master had given them, they were given even greater privilege to serve. They were given greater responsibility. But with that, they were also given greater joy. They saw joy. As you faithfully serve Jesus, He will give you more and more opportunity to serve. But it's not like, okay, well, so you're just telling me I'm going to be busy my whole life and running around in a circle serving and serving and serving? Well, partially, yes. But I love that He also gives you a chance to share in His joy. In His joy. Like His joy begins to become our joy. We get to share in that with our Master. And that's what this faithful servant, that's what they experience. But what about the other one? What about the third one? If you guys know the parable, you know what's coming already. The man who had received 1 talent also approached and said, Master, I know you. Master, I know you. You are a harsh man, reaping where you haven't sown and gathering where you haven't scattered seed. Oh boy. That's a problem, isn't it? He says, you reap where you haven't sown, gather where you haven't scattered. So what's the point? Well, look at this. I was afraid. What's the problem the 1 talent guy has? He was afraid. So he went off and he hid the master's talent in the ground. See, he says, you have what is yours. You have what is yours. Okay. This is pretty simple. The guy's scared. He's afraid because he sees that the master has entrusted him with something of value. And he says, well, what if I lose what the master's given me? Then I'm going to have to answer to that master. And it's not going to go well for me if I lose it. So I'm better just to dig a hole and throw it in there. And I don't have a lot anyway, right? I'm not a 5-talent guy. I'm a 1-talent guy. I have such a small amount, it's not even really a blip on the radar whenever we're talking about this guy who now has 14 talents. My 1 talent doesn't amount to a lot, does it? So I don't have a lot, so I have a little chance of making much, but I have a risk of losing everything, so it's probably better just not to try than to really lose it, right? That's kind of his logic, isn't it? I'm scared. But notice that it's really the character of the master that he's afraid of. In a sense, he blames the master for his failure. He says, because you're like this, I'm scared. And that's why I didn't try. Because of who you are, I'm scared. He blames his failure to produce on the master's character. Look at this response to the master. We get to verse 26. Okay. His master replied to him, "You evil, lazy servant." Far cry from well done, good and faithful servant, right? He says, if you knew that I reap where I haven't sown and gather where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and I would have received my money back with interest when I return. And you guys get that point. Why in the world did you dig a hole? Like, how foolish is that? I gave you, let's just say it's $20,000, and I say, hey, go multiply my money, manage it well, and you go dig a hole and throw it in. Like, I'm going to be upset. Why in the world didn't you just go down and see Lori and Leanne at the bank and say, hey, I need to invest this somewhere. Could you put it in a CD or something? Like, why in the world wouldn't you go do that and get your interest at least? Why not do that? That makes way more sense, doesn't it? Instead, all I get is my dirty money back. Not like it was gotten dirty. Yeah, whatever. Okay, you get the point. So, he rebukes him. He says, why wouldn't you do that? Verse 28, the master says, so take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For, here's the summary, for to everyone who has, more will be given. Again, see that. The one who has, more will be given. But, and again, here's this thing. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. To everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have more than enough. Here's the but. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Even what he has will be taken away from him. Lazy servant has everything stripped from him. And the one with 10 is given the one that was taken. Why? Well, because he was faithful with what he was given. He managed the master's talent well. Because he was faithful. So now he has more than he needs. But the servant with the one didn't have because he was unfaithful with what he was given. So now he has nothing. Everything he has is taken away. Here's the problem. First of all, that's bad enough, isn't it? Well, you would think, but it gets worse. Verse 30 goes on. He says, and throw that good-for-nothing servant into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And again, this is that eschatological darkness, like being cast out. Now, this wicked servant is assigned a place with the hypocrites and those who weren't prepared for the banquet. He's assigned a place with them, left out. And that brings us to the end of this parable. Okay, let's tie it all together. Let's try to boil it down to some simple things that we can take away and we can apply, okay? So let's try to do this. And if we boil this all down to one sentence, this is, again, the one sentence I've boiled all these 30 verses down to. And here's what I came up with. These two parables show us two expectations for us between Jesus' two advents, between his two comings, okay? Two parables with really two expectations for us, all right? That's pretty simple. Both of these point to the unexpectedness of Christ's return, but each is nuanced, right? They have their own flavor. They show us something slightly different here. They have their own twist that teaches us something slightly different, but a related lesson, okay? So let's just look at these parables one at a time. The first parable, the parable of the 10 virgins, it shows us that Jesus expects us to be prepared, right? Well, I hope you saw that as we walked through it. Jesus' expectation was preparation. Be ready. All right, in my house, I got kids, and my kids like to play hide and seek. Y'all ever played hide and seek? Anybody in this room never played hide and seek? Okay, good. I was going to say that would be weird if you've never played hide and seek. All right, and there's parts to hide and seek, right? The person who's it is the first thing you got to know. Who is the one who is seeking, right? You got to establish that. So that person, they decide who the person is that is it, and then that person who is it is supposed to count to an agreed upon number. At least it should be agreed upon number. If you play like my kids do, it's like one of them counts to 25, one of them counts to 8. So you never know when it's going to happen. But there should be an agreed upon number. All right? So the person who's it counts until it's time. But when they're finished counting, they always say the exact same thing. And this is super important, right? Okay, what does that person say? Ready or? Ready or not, here I come. Now, I sometimes think that we don't get that, right? My kids, they're trying to scramble and find their hiding place, and they don't find it in time. And the person who's it says, ready or not, here I come, and they're still scrambling, trying to find a place to hide. Does that matter? No, because you just said ready or not. Your preparation doesn't matter. The one who's it is coming, right? Okay, it's kind of like that. Jesus' return is kind of like that. The banner of the Lord will appear, and the trumpet will blast, and that's kind of God's way of saying, ready or not, here I come. Whether you are prepared or you are not prepared, he will be coming. And the entire world will hear it, they will see it, they will know it. There will be a time that it happens. And there's not going to be a chance for you to change things, no time for you to sort of switch sides like, well, you know what, I wasn't really in, but now that I see that this is real, now I'm going to hop over the fence and be on this side. There's none of that. At that time, choices have been made, and the verdict will be clear, and it will be internal, and you better believe it's going to be just. For those who were not prepared, well, they tried what they could, but it was too late, right? Think about these virgins. They go bang on the door and say, wait, we're here now. The master says, I don't know you. By the time they get to the banquet, the master had closed the door. Why? Because they were not prepared for when the groom came. See, oil in the Old Testament was sort of a purifying agent. You see this all throughout the Old Testament, pictures of sanctifying or purifying, and there's always olive oil anointing those holy things. So we see this purifying agent in the Old Testament. It was something that was used to set apart the holy from the unholy. And notice that that's the distinguishing character between these virgins, right? The ones with oil are set aside and they're allowed in. But by the time we get to the New Testament, oil became a picture of the Holy Spirit. It becomes a picture of the Holy Spirit. Jesus is saying that you better be sure that you are filled with the Spirit, that you are cleansed by His grace at the time that the groom shows up. You better have Him in you and with you, because there is a day coming when you'll either be in the banquet or you'll be left out in the darkness. The question I think Jesus is asking here with this parable is very, very simple, very pointed. Are you prepared? Are you prepared? Jesus expects us to be prepared. And just to be clear, here in just a minute, we're going to be done with this service, and people are going to go different ways. And if you're sitting there and you're asking yourself, am I prepared or am I not? Like, if the return of Jesus happened today, am I ready or not? Or you know what? I know, this is that scare tactic thing I was talking about earlier. But if you leave this place, you're not guaranteed to make it home, right? You all know that. I hope you know that. And if you don't, are you prepared? If you do make it home, are you prepared? Like, are you ready to meet Jesus? Are you ready for the groom to come? Because he expects us to be. Are you? That's the first parable, the parable of the 10 virgins. I think it's very clear. Jesus expects us to be prepared. Second parable, the parable of the talents. I think here's the expectation. Jesus expects us to be multiplied. He expects us to be multiplied. Okay, now there are too many things in this parable. I wanted to point to 50 different things in this parable and show you lessons that we could take away and things that we could apply, but y'all would walk out before we were done. So I'm going to try to just take a few of the highlights for me. And the first of that, here in this parable, as we say, are we multiplied? We just look at this, okay? God gives the talents according to the individual's ability because He knows what the individual has. He knows what you're capable of. Now, he's talking money, but again, because it's a parable, it represents something much bigger, which means that some of you in this room, some of you are 5-talent people. I know some of you, and I'm like, man, you are 5-talent people. You have ability. Some of you may be 2-talent people. Some of you may be 1-talent people. I don't know. Some of you may be 6, some of you may be 9, whatever, okay. The first step to using those talents is to realize that the master knows what you're capable of. If you're so paralyzed by fear because you don't think that you're capable, so you don't think that you're able, you're never going to put it to work. Understand that God gave you the talent that He gave you for a reason. He wouldn't give it to you if you weren't capable of using it. He's going to give you the strength you need to go. He knows your ability, and He has not given you more than you can manage. And to say that He's given you too much or too little is actually to suggest that you know better than God does. You realize that, right? Now, there's another way that this plays out. I'll admit that there have been times where I've looked at somebody I consider a 5-talent guy, and I'm like, man, I just want to be like them. Which I don't think it's bad to say, look, I want to emulate something in them. I don't think that's always bad. But what I need to recognize is God has not gifted me like the other guy. Just this week, I listened to a sermon by Matt Chandler. Matt Chandler is a 5-talent guy. Y'all ever listen to Matt Chandler? A guy can preach, and I'm like, wow, why can't I do what he did? Well, because God hasn't gifted me the same way he has Matt Chandler. Sorry, guys, I'm not Matt Chandler. I'm just not. That's okay. I'm good with that. But what we need to understand is God has given us what we need. What we have to acknowledge is that we are all wired just a little bit different. God has given us different levels, different abilities, different talents to use. The question is what we do with those, not what we have. Are you putting it to work, or are you trying to hide it in the ground? Which one are you? I've actually had conversations with people who have asked, how do you get to be fill in the blank? And the answer is, well, you don't. You don't get to be somebody else. That's not the point. You're not somebody else. God has given you what he's given you. Utilize the talents he's given you. He's gifted us in various ways according to our ability so that we can take those talents and make them multiply. Okay? That's the first thing I want you to see. Second, notice that there is no possible failure when the talent is given, right? There's no failure unless you just hide it. Nothing can be lost. Did you catch that? Like the guy with 5, what did he do? Whenever he put it to work, he doubled it. He doubled it. The guy with 2, he went and doubled it. The guy with 1 should have at least put it in the bank, and it would not have lost because, well, then it would have gained interest, right? Now, here's the thing that we need to understand. At this time, banking was not as sure as it is today. It's not like they had FDIC that was going to back your money, okay? They didn't have that. If the bank lost your money, they lost your money. It was gone, okay? If they managed it poorly, it was just gone. But Jesus says, no, it's a guarantee that it would have gained interest. We would have made something. He presents it as if it's a sure thing. Why? Well, because this is what I think. When you use what God has entrusted to you for his glory, it will not fail. It will not fail. Again, I was listening to Matt Chandler, and he kept saying this thing in this sermon. He kept saying, God's scorecard is different than ours. God's scorecard is different than ours. See, we look at success and failure in this light over here, and we think this is what success and failure looks like. That's not God's scorecard. Okay? What do I mean? Let me explain this way. Let's just say that I went and I told somebody about Jesus. And they say, I don't want to hear about that stuff. I'm done with it. Don't talk to me. Did I fail? The answer is no. I did what I was responsible for, right? I shared the good news of Jesus with that person, assuming I did it faithfully. I did not fail. That was a success, even though this person may not have been converted on the spot. I don't know what that's going to turn into down the road, right? I have no idea. And even if it doesn't turn into something, that's not God's scorecard, whether the person was converted or not. Were we faithful with what he gave us, with the opportunities, with the talents that he gave us? See, the success is telling. So use the gifts and the talents that God has given you, and it will not fail. It will not fail. Use it. Put it to work, just like the 5 and the 2 talent guys did. But the last thing I want to point out to you is this. Notice that everything that is being used here, who does it really belong to? It all belongs to the master, doesn't it? I got to talk to Alan earlier this week. Actually, was that yesterday? Day before. Anyway, I was talking to Alan Yoakum out here, and he and I were talking about this. We have a bad habit of saying, this is my whatever. We think it's ours. And I'll give you an example here in just a minute, but we think something is ours, and we take possession of it, we take ownership, and we treat it as if it belongs to me. It doesn't belong to God. This is mine. And whether we mean to do that or not, we do this all the time. But what we have to acknowledge is that everything belongs to the master. See, this 1-talent guy, he poorly manages it because he's scared of his ability and losing the master's money. But the ability is really already identified by the master. It's not up to him. Everything here belongs to the master, so go and use it. And even if you think maybe I can lose it, it's not yours. It's the master's. Manage it well. Manage it well. Here's the example I'll use, okay? I think I told you all already I have kids. I think about my kids. My kids are ultimately not mine, and I know that. I know that my kids are not ultimately mine. I am tasked with managing them for a time. My kids don't belong to me, though. I love my kids dearly, but my kids belong to God. They're his. He just entrusted them to me. My job is to sharpen them and then to shoot them out and do damage to the enemy. That's my responsibility. Because he entrusted them to me, so I need to manage them well. What we need to do is we need to start acknowledging that everything that we have is from the Master. The talents that you have, like the gifts that you have, the things that you are capable of, they aren't yours. Stop it. Some of you can sing. We had some ladies up here who can sing. That talent isn't yours. That talent belongs to the Master. Put it to work for the Master. We could go on and on about all these. The point is, use what the Master has given you to see it multiplied. Manage it well. Okay? So, what do I want to urge you with today? So, be prepared. Take what the Master's given you, see it multiplied. And if you're not sure what either of those things really looks like, I want to talk to you. Like, I want to talk to you. Like, seriously, if you're saying to yourself, like, I'm not sure I'm prepared. Or you're saying, I'm not sure what God has gifted me with. I want to talk to you. Like, seriously, don't leave this place. I'm going to wait here at the front. I might be wrangling some of my kids, but please come talk to me. Please, I see that? I just said my kids. There you go. But please, whether you are prepared or you're not, if you're not sure, come talk to me. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, because I don't have all the answers. I don't. But I do have some answers. Sometimes Enoch, my third child, he asked me, he said, well, you don't know everything. He's my sassy child. Love that boy. Sometimes he says, you don't know everything. I say, you're right. I don't know everything. But I do know a few things. Okay? What I'm trying to tell you is I don't have all the answers for you. But I do have some of the answers. And I would love to talk with you, and I'll give you those answers if I have them. And if not, I'd be happy to walk alongside you as we find them. Okay? So that's the promise I can make you. I don't have all the answers, but I'll be happy to walk alongside you as we try to uncover those answers that we don't have. Jesus expects us to be prepared, and then he expects us to be multiplied. Are you going to be faithful with that? Let's pray. Father, God, I am so thankful today that you call us to be prepared, that you expect us to be prepared, and then you give us everything we need to be prepared. So, Lord, for those in this room right now who are asking themselves, am I really ready if the groom comes today? Lord, I pray that they would see themselves as you see them, as image bearers of God. Lord, but within that, we have marred that image. We have tarnished it. That's the word I was looking for. We have tarnished that image. Lord, so I pray that we would see that, but we would come to you as the one who can give us the oil we need to get into the banquet. You can fix that image. You can restore that image. So, Lord, I pray that if anyone here is not prepared, I pray that they would become prepared today. Lord, and likewise, I would pray for those who are prepared. I'd pray that as they see the gifts, the talents, the things that you've given them, I pray that they would see them as your belongings, and then they would faithfully put them to work to see them multiplied. So, Father, just let us be faithful with what you've entrusted to us. God, I'm so thankful that you've made that possible through your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.